So today we're going to be taking a look at a scenario where Rome reappears in the modern day. Now, of course, the Roman Empire was one of the largest in history, and honestly, it's kind of amazing how it held together for so long. But it is back here in 2023, or whenever you're watching this, and it's just as strong as it was back then, if not even stronger. Now, of course, they're going to be possessing powerful countries such as France, Italy, Turkey. All those guys are really strong, so they get all their equipment, all of their military, stuff like that. And this possibly could be the strongest country in the world. So if you guys do enjoy this video, make sure to leave a like on it and subscribe to the channel if you're new. We're on day 2 of daily upload week. We're still trying to get to 100,000 subscribers. So if you haven't subscribed already, make sure to do so. We're going to try to get there before the end of January, although there's no real deadline. Anyway, let's go ahead and jump right into this video. So Rome has just reappeared in the modern day, and obviously the world is going to be very confused how this ancient empire has just resurfaced, considering that it's made up of a lot of different groups that wouldn't get along, like the Turks or the Israelis and the Palestinians, the Spaniards and the Moroccans. There's a lot of groups here that wouldn't mix well together, but somehow, in some way, Rome has reunited. Now, it is important to note that this isn't a 100% accurate border. I tried my best just to look off a reference and then redraw it onto the map. It's close enough to where it's still considered Rome. Also, I didn't know that the border between England and Scotland is literally the Roman border that was made hundreds of years ago, so that's kind of interesting how they kept that as the border. Anyway, Rome's first task as a new country empire thing is to invade the remainder of Austria and the remainder of Moldova. These are weak countries. Well, they're barely even existing at this point, and Rome's just going to finish them off in order to get the extra land. So there goes Austria, and there goes Moldova. Rome has just expanded for the first time, and Europe is absolutely terrified of this monster right here, because honestly, they're going to have their way with Europe. I mean, I don't see how they could protect themselves. Looking at the countries which have been affected by Rome's existence, obviously the UK, which is just broken down to Scotland and Northern Ireland. Germany lost a big chunk of land. The northern African countries here are going to be screwed because they don't have access to that Mediterranean, especially Algeria with all their stuff up here. Same thing with Libya and Tunisia. They're barely surviving. Over to the Middle East, Iraq is not even there. Iran took a hit, but nothing too crucial. Same thing with Saudi Arabia. Egypt is pretty much done. Overall, the world around Rome is hurting, and that's going to make Rome very happy. So now Rome is going to go after a couple more countries, and those countries are going to be the ones that are barely surviving. So Iraq, Georgia, and Azerbaijan. At this point, no one dares to try to stop Rome because they're just too much too fast. They managed to wipe out the Caucasus, and soon after we had the fall of Iraq. But now we finally have some countries doing some things. First off, we have Ireland and Scotland, as well as Northern Ireland, uniting into the Celtic Union. Not much of a big game changer for them, but I guess they're better off together than they are alone. Germany and the remainder of the Netherlands unite into just Germany, and another country that joins that is surprisingly enough going to be Czechia, not Czechoslovakia. Slovakia is going to chill on their own. They're going to try to peace out with Rome, but Rome's not having any of that. Then we have another union breaking out between Norway, Sweden, Denmark, and Iceland. So just changes to try to get more power into their hands. Nothing much, nothing too major, but nonetheless, they're still going to try to prevent Rome's expansion. But now Rome is going to take their eyes off of Europe and the Middle East and go into Northern Africa, where they don't have as much land as they'd like. First off, they're going after Morocco. Troops enter in from the north and are going full force. Morocco is going to be able to defend off a little bit here, but once again, it is basically just this, all of these armies within these countries are united together under Rome, so that's going to be near to impossible to stop. So the Romans quickly go down into Morocco. They take what the most valuable land is considered, and eventually Morocco surrenders. We see full annexation by Rome and a bunch of Roman troops sitting on the border of Algeria. But Algeria, it does have a little bit of a trick up their sleeve, and that trick is to unite with all the other countries who lost land from Rome. But there is just one thing that's wrong with this, and that is the latter of what I just said, which is countries that lost land to Rome. And like I said earlier on in the video, North Africa lost all of its valuable land and is literally just a few maybe populated areas along the border and then desert. So yeah, this might not have been the best move for all these other countries. The Romans start their invasion in over here from Morocco, where their troops are already lying across the border. We also see them use their armies over here near Carthage and pushing in from here. And overall, we are seeing a majority of Rome's assets over here in Algeria because that is where they mostly plan to invade. I'm sure they did have some scouting troops along this border just to scout, but I don't think they're geared up for an invasion. So surprisingly enough, if it's surprising at all, the blue team will be able to gain some land here, and it's going to kind of hurt Rome because they're going to go ahead and cut them off from each other. Now, don't get me wrong, the entire Mediterranean is Roman, so they could just do that, but something like this does kind of hurt in the long run if there are any trade routes through here, and the blue team is able to take control of this, and it's just going to kind of look bad on Rome for a couple of weeks. We also have the blue team making a campaign into southern Egypt. They get fairly far considering that they are barely even alive until they are stopped and soon to be decimated. Now, like I said, like multiple times now, this is a Rome with modern day equipment. So bombs, nukes, death, you name it, they got it. The Romans start releasing their newly found long-range missiles all over the blue team here, specifically hitting these armies over here, destroying some of their own land, but that's okay because they're Rome. They have plenty of land. Long story short, these guys are kicked out of where they have invaded. I hate this mouse. I need to get a new mouse now. So the Romans continue to push in, and they're doing so at a pretty rapid pace. Now, they're not going to push fully into the Saharan desert because there's literally no need to do that. After a few more weeks of fighting, we were left with front lines that look something like this. And at this point, the blue team is going to go ahead and surrender because they have nothing less to fight for. All right, looking at these new lovely borders here, the Roman Empire is going to become the Roman world if we keep letting it going. And it's just looking not good for whoever is on the border of this country. Now, of course, there are going to be countries who are going to be capable of stopping Rome, such as the USA. The only problem is there's a giant ocean separating them, so there won't be any like land battles. It would all be naval, and even then, the US would have a really hard time trying to invade any of this. I could also see Russia doing some damage, maybe even China. But in order to topple this, we would have to have the US, Russia, China, and maybe even India all working together to bring down Rome. And that's just because it's such a vast empire. It's in a pretty inconvenient location for those four countries. And also, it's just like really freaking strong for some reason. So Rome's rapid expansion is once again alarming countries all around it. And now we're going to have the largest union take place in this video. Before that, Western Sahara sinks into the bottom of the ocean. And the Saharan African Union has just formed. Now, a lot of these countries that just joined this union are Islamic. And that may have something to do with Rome's attack on their northern Islamic neighbors. But also just because these are a bunch of border states who don't want to lose their sovereignty, so they're going to give up their sovereignty to each other in order to stop Rome from just taking it themselves. So some notable countries that join this are obviously going to be Sudan, which is probably the most notable one there. We have Ghana, Chad, of course, Mali. No like major powerhouses joining, but Nigeria is strongly considered joining, as well as Cameroon. And I don't really think anyone else will want to join because they're probably out of range for Rome. But now another large one takes place over here in the Arabian Peninsula, and this one is between Saudi Arabia, Oman, the UAE, Qatar, and Kuwait. Once again, probably not going to be strong enough to hold back Rome, but it will be like a big slowdown if they do try to invade Saudi Arabia, which I don't even think they will. But now Rome is going to go ahead and do something that's going to get them into some trouble later on in the video. But for now, they're going to invade Ukraine. Why do they want to invade Ukraine? Well, because the Black Sea touches the Mediterranean Sea, and anything that touches the Mediterranean Sea is Roman. Therefore, invasion. Now, I'm pretty sure Rome did also control Crimea or some southern parts of it. I just didn't draw that in because I thought it would look weird. But anyway, Roman troops now enter in from Romania, and to say the least, Ukraine is not up to par with Rome. Once again, like, we're not even buffing Rome here. They're just like, this is insanely powerful. I don't know how anyone would stop this. And yeah, Ukraine will not be able to do it themselves here. But they do meet up with the Dnieper River, and this is where we see something interesting happen. Russia joins the war, because that's a very Russian thing to do. These guys are going to go ahead and start to invade into the Donbass area, as well in from northern Ukraine. Now, they are not on the same side as Rome here. That's why they're a different color. And the reason for invading Ukraine is very different. Well, actually, kind of isn't. They're not going after the Mediterranean Sea, but they are going after Ukraine because they want land. Same thing Rome's doing. So maybe these two guys aren't too different from each other. We'll see here in a couple minutes though. So overall, Rome and Russia managed to capture this much land, and now they're just kind of staring at each other at the border. Russia wants to be friendly, Rome does not want to be friendly, and they're just going to go ahead and meet in Kyiv to divide up what they have. Looking at this peace deal here, it doesn't really look fair to Russia, and that's because it's not. The Russian ambassador who met in Kyiv with the Roman, probably just the Roman king, because that's a very Roman thing to do, send your highest official to a meeting. He's going to like threaten the Russian ambassador, and they're going to get a lot more land than they should have, and this makes Vladimir Putin very angry. So Vladimir Putin sends a bunch of his troops down here to the border of Rome, and they start taunting the Romans. You had that coming, buddy. Turns out the more you mess around, the more you find out. And Vladimir Putin is about to find out very hard that you don't mess with the Romans. Now at first, the Romans are going to have a very sweeping campaign here. It looks like Russia wasn't even ready for this war, and that's because they're not. But after losing a majority of their southern land, their army finally gets their head out of the dirt, or I guess their head out of the snow, and they start to fight back against the Romans. And they actually do a lot better than the most of the world would anticipate. They start to bulge down towards the sea right here. I forgot the name of, and that's where Rome's like, haha, just kidding, and their troops just kind of. Yep. So Russia sends a letter of apology over to the Roman king, who rips it up, but ultimately still accepts the peace deal, or I guess accepts talks to peace. And they once again meet up in Kyiv, and this time Vladimir Putin is there, and the Roman king is not there. But the only thing is, Vladimir Putin is not a very threatening guy, so the Romans are going to be able to get what they want here. And looking at this peace deal here, Rome is at its all-time greatest, taking a huge portion of southern Russia, and leaving Russia without a lot of valuable land full of resources, especially over here in the Caucasus. But now the world is seeing it. Rome just tore up Russia. Rome would most likely tear up the USA, so what is the world going to do? Well, that seems very appropriate. Now, why didn't Slovakia get colored in? Well, that's because they're Roman. I forgot to show that clip before I showed this clip, so there goes Slovakia. Anyway, the most unlikely of countries have just come together to form the Anti-Roman Expansion Alliance, which, it's consisting of a lot of big players here. Those said big players include the United States, includes India, Russia, Germany, Poland, the Scandinavian Union, Finland, the the Saharan African Union, Iran, and Saudi Arabia, or I guess just Arabia. Lots of big players in this alliance here, and Rome is not going to be too happy about its existence. So they're going to take it out on Kazakhstan. Now, what did Kazakhstan do to deserve this? Nothing. They don't deserve this. Rome thinks they do though, so they start to invade them. And at the same time as this is happening, Kazakhstan joins in on the Anti-Roman Expansion Alliance. And Rome is given an option. They can either leave or go to war with the Allies. Rome says, let us take what we want and we'll be done, and they agreed to that. Alright, Rome is looking ridiculously long now. They span all the way over here from the tip of Morocco to Kazakhstan. That is a large country. As south as Algeria and as north as England. This is a country you really don't want to mess with. I mean, let's just fill in the square that it fits in here. Yeah, that's like a good portion of the world. And unfortunately for the world, Rome's kind of outlook is something that looks like this. Now, that's a lot, but Rome thinks they can do it. Now, there's only one problem. Rome can't really expand anywhere, especially with countries like Uzbekistan and Turkmenistan joining this anti-Roman alliance. And now they officially border no countries which are neutral. So Rome says, you know what? Let's roll the dice here. We're about to collapse from all these different ethnicities clashing within us. Why don't we just try to go to war with this purple team? And go to war with the purple team they do. It's time to experience a mass amount of death in Europe for the third or fourth or maybe even fifth time in history. So almost instantly, the Celtic Union is put out to dry. Following this, the Romans used their mass amount of troops, which are already over here, to invade up into Russia, hoping to reach Moscow and knock them out of the war. This is by far going to be Rome's biggest task, because this is the most countries they've ever fought at once, also the most amount of land that they've ever had to invade. So like I said, they are going to go push for Moscow first, and a spearhead is created to go up north in order to capture the city. Meanwhile, we have Rome pushing down the coast of Arabia and into southern Iran. In Africa, they don't really do much because there's no point in trying to invade these guys, so they instead focus on everywhere else, with them pushing up into Czechia and Germany, and pretty much taking out this country within a few weeks. Belarus is invaded, as well as Poland, and it really just looks like a Roman barrage here, and that's because that's exactly what it is. Now, secretly, US troops and Canadian troops are swarming into Africa, especially over here in the Western Saharan Sea, but for now, they don't do much. I mean, of course, they're going to be sending troops over into Europe in order to fight on the front lines of, I guess, at this point, Poland, but that's like a very annoying route to get there. Like, you would have to go up, and then, like, yeah, that's annoying to get there. So I don't know where they would fight. India's doing the same thing. They're sending troops right into Arabia and troops right into Iran. Russia, of course, is fighting for its life right now. But since the Romans did kind of disregard Africa, the blue team down here is going to be able to push into their puppet state. This pretty much goes unnoticed by the Romans since this is just a majority, like, of desert areas. But it will set up the blue team that be able to set up camps along this border and eventually invade the actual Roman parts. But yeah, everywhere else, Rome is having the major advantage. They're thickening out their spearhead over here near Moscow. They're also pushing into Kazakhstan now for some reason. Back down in Arabia, they aren't having much success with a mass amount of Indian troop there, but there's a little bit less of Indian troops in Iran, which gives way for them to be able to push even further. Now they go up from the south in order to try to capture Tehran, which is Iran's capital, since there's a lot of mountains over here. Wouldn't want to go through those. But I wouldn't be surprised if they somehow managed to pick up something from Carthage and use, like, I guess, elephants. Or what would, like, the modern equivalent to elephants be? That would probably just be tanks. They'd figure out how to do it. I bet you they would. Back over to Russia, we have a major event taking place, which is the capturing of Moscow by the Romans. Germany couldn't do it, France couldn't do it, but the Romans, which are basically just France and Germany and a bunch of other countries combined, they could do it. So now with Moscow gone, Russia is still going to try to hold out as best as they can, although they are losing their stability really quickly. We have the Romans meeting up with the Baltic Sea and cutting off Poland from the Baltics. Speaking of the Baltics, they have nothing really to fight for as they barely even have armies. And it's really looking like Rome might be able to win this war somehow. Meanwhile, back down in Africa, the blue team has managed to take out all of the puppet state, and Rome still has not really known. I mean, of course they know, but like the higher up military commanders, they're like, oh yeah, sure, I'm busy, I'm doing Moscow right now, leave me alone. And this is going to come back to bite them because the US and Canada, and now even India, who withdrew some of their troops from Saudi Arabia, put them across the Red Sea and over into Africa, they have a bunch of troops along this front line, close to 1 million. And yes, there was a draft because, I mean, this is like, if you lose this war, it's over. Not just for you, but basically the entire world, as long as Rome can stay stable. But finally, we have E-Day happening, which is the sequel to D-Day. American troops who are tasked with invading Morocco, Algeria, Tunisia, and Western Libya are going to be lined up across this border, while Canadians and Indians are going to be lined up over here in order to take Egypt and the remainder of Libya. On June 7th, 2025 or 6, we have American troops crossing the border into mainland Rome. This marks one of the only times that Rome has been invaded by someone that they are currently invading, and Rome is quick to pick up on this, except they're not that quick to pick up on it. You see, the Roman commanders down here in this region, they were told about it, but unfortunately they mysteriously disappeared before they were able to send any messages to the Roman king. So there is a mass amount of delay, but just like do remember this is the modern day, so of course like technology, you can just send a quick Snapchat to your king like, hey yo, Americans here, send help, please. LMAO. So the American campaign is going great as they break up and finally meet the Mediterranean Sea. For the Indians Canadians, it's also going well as they finally meet up with the Mediterranean Sea as well and push over towards Alexandria. They cut off a big chunk of Roman troops who are forced to surrender, and now they meet up with the Egyptian coast along the Red Sea and almost take all of it. So overall, E-Day is going great for the blue team, and it will continue to go great as southern parts of Morocco are reclaimed, and now we're just left with the more populated areas of Rome, which are of course going to be over here in Morocco, Tunisia, Libya, and this part of Algeria, and then the more populated areas of Egypt. Now Rome of course knows about this now. I mean, they've lost a good portion of their land, so they're going to start to kind of slow down on their advance up here, especially over here in Germany, and they're going to like start sending troops down south in order to fight against these guys. Now the US and co did have a plan for this because of course the Mediterranean Sea is a huge advantage for Rome right now. So the US uses this cool thing called ICBMs. They launch them from over here because they most likely don't have any over here. I don't see why they would, but they're going to strike a lot of areas including Tunis. They're going to strike any ports in Morocco. Basically, they're going after any major ports that Rome does have. All the white dots include major military ports for Rome, and they are now in ruins, and Rome is going to try to repair these, but honestly, they're probably not going to have enough time before the Americans get there. Now, like I said, Rome also has their own modern technology, so they send one right back at the US and strike major ports and cities along the eastern coast of America. This gets the war pretty close to nuclear war between the US and Rome, which is something I thought I would never ever say in my life, but here we are. But I think Rome might be smart enough not to use those shiny bombs that they have in France. Anyway, with the Roman navy unable to help the army get down here to Africa, the Roman king gives the orders to abandon everything down here. Basically, if there are any shipping routes to leave, take those shipping routes and get out before the Americans kill you. And that's mostly what happens with Africa falling to the blue team. So now the US and co over here near Egypt and Israel, and they're gonna go ahead and push across. Now the Romans are still defending here, but they still kind of have that retreat mentality. So the Americans are able to take advantage of that and push further in than they're supposed to. And they start to get up right behind the enemies over here in Arabia. So with them now in northern Saudi Arabia, they're running a huge risk of getting encircled. That is for the Romans, and that is exactly what happens. Yeah, communication is still apparently back in the before Christ times for Rome. The Arabians are able to take advantage of this encirclement and completely wipe out a large legion of the Roman army. At this point now, the Roman king is just basically pulling his hair out as his lower ranking officials in the military are apparently they don't know how to fight a war. And he's even more mad when they pull their troops out of Saudi Arabia and Iran for no apparent reason. This in turn leads to a ginormous gain by the blue team in Iran over here, who are now knocking on the door of the European steppes. Now fortunately for Rome, they were able to push into Poland and Germany and capitulate it, as well as Denmark, and they now have made a landing over here in Sweden. But the problem from the south grows as Rome is starting to slowly slowly start to kind of fall apart. Yeah, that they have a lot of countries under their control right now, and the problem with that is that that's a lot of countries, and unconsensually invaded countries at that. It's also winter time, and oh no, there goes Russia. Okay, well, it's yep, that's gonna happen. Winter time in the Baltics as well, and northern Belarus. So Rome at this point is it's really been flipped on them. They've probably lost more land than they've gained at this point, and Rome is gonna start to maybe think about leaving this war, trying to get a peace deal. But the blue team isn't going to accept it because they're coming crashing down right now, and they have an opportunity to get even more land back than they originally had. Canada makes a landing over here in the Celtic area, which was surprisingly only being defended by around 20,000 people, and it's no different with Britain, who they just kind of breezed through. So now Rome is really screwed. I mean, they're losing so much land. Sweden just pushed them back, and the Russians are continuing to roll in through the winter. We have them losing all of their gains over here in Eastern Europe, and at this point they're basically only holding on to the key Roman Empire areas which they originally had. The king does one last order, and that is to full send all troops everywhere, and this actually goes pretty well for them. Troops re-enter into Sweden, take Oslo as well as Stockholm. We have them retaking all of Belarus and the southern Baltics, pushing into Russia as well. Russian troops are pushed back, as well as troops over here in the Middle East, and it was a pretty good counteroffensive. But oh no, Romania just broke away. There goes Iberia. All right, they surrender. So let's see what the blue team is gonna do to Rome here. Well, that probably wasn't as bad as Rome thought it was gonna be. I don't know what happened to the map. It's turning red and it's also fading, so I'm just gonna go over this pretty quickly. I don't know why this is happening, but Rome is reduced down to only France, Italy, Belgium, Luxembourg, and then a handful of the Baltic countries here. Half of Hungary, who was weirdly enough given over to Romania of all countries. And then we come down to Africa. It also consists of Morocco, a little bit of Algeria, and just the northern coast that they once had. Now Egypt is released, Iberia is released, Turkey and some of the Baltics are released, and this is a huge cut into the empire, but the empire does still exist because you can see it here highlighted in red. They also for some reason still control Cyprus, and this is just a map mistake here. Yep, just ignore that. I don't know why this is happening. But yeah, Rome is beat back. They're forced to have a reduced military. Their economy is in shambles. They start inflating and printing money. And a weird guy with a mustache comes into power. That's going to wrap up this video. If you guys did enjoy it, make sure to leave a like on it and subscribe to the channel if you are new. Day 2 of daily upload week. Day 3 is tomorrow. Day 4 is the following day. And I would hope that you guys know that because that's pretty common knowledge how days work and stuff. But yeah, so subscribe if you haven't already. 100K, trying to get there, and I'll see you guys in the next video.